We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
A very good morning, everybody. This is To The Point on GB News with me, Patrick Christie's, on your TV, radio and online. I'm with you all the way through until midday with a show jam-packed with all of today's biggest stories, lots of chat as well, and, of course, your expert guests. Make sure that you get in touch with your views as usual, gbviews at gbnews.uk. I'm going to be getting stuck into the Rwanda deal early doors. I'm not convinced it's going to be a massive deterrent, and yep, you better, the lefty lawyers have got involved. GB viewers at gbnews.uk. We'll go to those throughout the show, but first, time for your latest headlines.
Thanks, Patrick. Good morning. It's 1 minute past 10. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. The average price of filling up a typical family car has surpassed £100 for the first time. The RAC says it's a truly dark day for drivers, as the average price for a litre of petrol reached a record 182 pence and diesel reached a record 188 pence. It's after the biggest daily jump in petrol prices for 17 years. Senior Environmental Research Fellow at Imperial College, Malcolm Grimston, told GB News it's only going to get worse.
There's about a 2-week gap between the wholesale price of oil increases and that price going through to the pumps. And that's because we don't store a great deal of petrol. So when the price goes up, ultimately the pump price has to go up as well. The fundamental driver of this is the international oil situation. And there's no sign of it getting better. We don't know what's going to happen in Ukraine, but sanctions on Russia are likely to increase rather than decrease. It just shows that we didn't invest enough in robustness in the system to deal with these sorts of things during the good times. And we're now paying.
The Prime Minister is set to announce a string of housing reforms. They include plans for lower-paid workers to use housing benefits to buy their homes. Boris Johnson will make a speech in Lancashire later. It's expected he'll extend the right to buy scheme for housing association tenants. He'll argue £30 billion in housing benefit that currently goes towards rent could help people secure and pay for mortgages. Thousands of customers were provided an unacceptable service by electricity networks following Storm Arwen. A review by the energy watchdog Ofgem found many households were without power for more than 10 days. Some complained of poor communication from their suppliers about when they'd be reconnected. The storm, which carried winds of up to 100 miles per hour, left nearly 1 million homes in Britain without power in November last year. The government's considering radical measures to reduce smoking rates in the country. It's commissioned a review due to be published today, which could raise the legal smoking age to in the UK to 21. Rates have come down significantly since the 1970s, but there are still an estimated 7 million smokers across the UK. The government's determined to deliver on its manifesto pledge to have a smoke-free Britain by 2030, which means getting smoking rates down to 5% or less. A firefighters' union leader says he isn't hopeful that the Grenfell Tower inquiry will lead to significant change. Matt Rack, General Secretary of the Fire Brigades Union, has warned that lessons aren't being learned from fires in the UK. He says there are still many buildings with the same cladding as Grenfell Tower and that the removal process has been painfully slow. Kareem Musili, whose uncle died in the Grenfell fire, says the lack of justice means he's unable to grieve.
It's a very ugly place, and I've almost lost faith in humanity for various different reasons. And I mean, we've lost our families, we've lost our homes, and we're still made to feel like we've been put in this position where if you want justice, you have to fight for it. If you want people to be safe, you have to fight for it. If you want positive changes so that this doesn't happen again, you have to fight for it. If you want to make sure that your loved ones are not being remembered the way that they are today, which is by a culture of neglect and corruption and greed, then you have to fight for it.
2 British fighters who were captured by Russian forces in Ukraine could face 20 years in prison after appearing in court in the separatist region of Donetsk. In a video shared by Russian state media, Aidan Aslin and Sean Pinner allegedly admitted to training in order to carry out terrorist activities. Mr. Pinner could also face the death penalty after allegedly admitting to seizing power by force. A vigil's been held in central London this morning for a British journalist and an Indigenous expert who are missing in the Brazilian Amazon. Dom Phillips and Bruno Araújo Pereira vanished from a remote part of the rainforest more than 3 days ago. They were reportedly last seen early on Sunday. The Brazilian government has dispatched Navy, Army and federal police personnel to join a search for the pair in the vast Indigenous reserve. The libel claim made by the Duke of Sussex against the Mail on Sunday publisher is due to have its first hearing at the High Court this morning. Harry is suing Associated Newspapers Limited after they published a story on his legal case against the Home Office. It was in regards to his security arrangements whilst visiting the UK. In his claim filed with the court, Harry said the piece published in February allegedly caused him substantial hurt and embarrassment. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens now, though. It's back to Patrick with To The Point.
Good morning, everybody. This is To The Point on GB News with me, Patrick Christie's, on your TV, radio and online. And my gosh, have we got a great show lined up for you today to kickstart your day. So, here's what's on the menu. Could the government's Rwanda plan be hitting the buffers before a single deportation flight actually takes off? I'll be asking, did the government ever really intend to deport anyone to Rwanda? Or did they just say what they all wanted us to hear? Anyway, the legal age for banned cigarettes could be increased to 21 as part of the government's plans to make England smoke-free by 2030. Is this sensible? Or can grown-ups make their own decisions without the state getting involved? We'll be debating all of that. Now, the cost of fuel is skyrocketing. I'm sure this is affecting absolutely all of you at home. If you're listening to us, frankly, in your car, of course, on the radio, it is hitting £2 per litre in some areas. How is this going to compare with other countries? How is this going to increase? Certainly, it's not going to go down anytime soon, is it? And what changes have you had to make to deal with the price rises? Get in touch. Let us know. We are the People's Channel, GBViews at GBNews. .uk. Now, we've got all of that coming up and much, much more across this epic programme. You can get in touch with your views as usual, like I've just said, gbviews at gbnews.uk. But first, my take on potential legal challenges to the Rwanda migrant deal. Well, surprise, surprise, the lefty lawyers are trying to block the Rwanda deal. There are now numerous challenges in play trying to claim that the Rwanda deal is unlawful and must be stopped. The first flight is set to depart on June the 14th, but, of course, that's not far away now, is it? But Priti Patel's right to carry out such removals, the rationality of her claim that Rwanda is generally a safe third country, the adequacy of provision for malaria prevention in Rwanda, and whether or not it complies with the Human Rights Act, These are all being challenged. While the bleeding heart Liberals do all that they can to block deportations, the number of refugees and asylum seekers, some will say illegal immigrants as well, crossing the Channel to reach the UK so far this year has passed 10,000. That's a huge number. And let's not forget that we don't know who the vast majority of these people actually are. They ditch their documents in the Channel. They very often lie about what country they're from, and we simply don't know what their intentions are. Whilst I'm all for seeing the best in everyone, of course, and natural human emotions like kindness, generosity, there is a pretty simple principle at play here, isn't there? If someone knocked on your front door right now and said, "Hello, I'm not going to tell you what my name is, where I'm from, or what my background is. Can I come and live with you, please?" You'd say no. But this country keeps saying yes. These lefty lawyers like to tell people that they're on the side of vulnerable people. Right, they're not. In my opinion, they're on the side of human traffickers. Their pontificating means one thing and one thing only. Those people who trade in human lives keep getting richer. People keep putting their lives at risk. More people will die. There's nothing kind and benevolent about that at all. But there is an even bigger problem here, isn't there? This Rwanda plan only works if it's a deterrent. It has to be a deterrent, otherwise people will keep on coming in record numbers. If it emerges that Boris Johnson has overpromised and underdelivered, i.e. that he said that he's going to send loads of illegal immigrants to Rwanda, the flight's going to take off next week, etc., and then that doesn't happen, then I'm concerned that it could be the final nail in his coffin. He has to get this right. It's time now to stand up and show some leadership on this. Get out of the Westminster bubble and get into the places like the pubs of the North East, the Midlands, the North West, Wales. Get into the pub and talk to people, because the vast majority of us want the Channel issue sorted ASAP. They want a conveyor belt leading all the way to Rwanda. A lot of Boris Johnson's problems, frankly, would go away if he sorts out what's happening in the Channel. Tell those lefty lawyers to back off and get those planes on the runway. Yeah, we'll keep those views coming in, people. GBViews at gbnews.uk. We're going to be talking about this throughout the show because obviously we had the news that the government's Rwanda plan could now be delayed by these legal challenges. All too predictable, really, isn't it? Meaning more delay, less deterrent, etc., etc. So was the government essentially playing politics all along? Did they ever seriously plan to send anyone to Rwanda, or did they really want to be seen, basically, as just doing a token gesture? Joining me now, our immigration and human rights lawyer, Harjap Singh Bangal, and chairman of Migration Watch, Alp Mehmet. So I'd love to start the show with a little bit of a head-to-head. Fantastic stuff. Alp, I'll start with you, please, my good man. Do you think that the government actually ever really intended to send people to Rwanda?
Yes, I do, Patrick. I don't think there's any question that that was the government's intention. It's a pretty elaborate process to go to just to fool everyone that they didn't really mean it or want to do it. Whether it happens, look, first of all, can I just say that, as I've said, I'm pretty sure on your program and on other programs, Rwanda was never going to be sufficient on its own. It had to be part of a wider process of denying entry to those who are seeking to come here by any means possible. And that, I'm afraid, is where I do agree with you on that people should not be able to say, I want to come here, you've got to let me in. That is not what international law is all about.
Yeah. OK, all right, Harjap, I'll throw it over to you, of course, a human rights lawyer, an immigration lawyer as well. A lot of people are going to be very angry with some lawyers this morning when it turns out they're trying to put the skids on the Rwanda deal. Why are lawyers, essentially, in this case, it would seem to me, on the side of human traffickers?
The fact is, the law that's being passed to enable this doesn't come in till the 28th of June. So why couldn't the flight be set on the 29th of June? The flight has been set on the 14th of June. Now, either Priti Patel knows that the law doesn't go in on 28th of June, she should know she made it, right? Or that she's totally incompetent, that she's trying to get this through anyway. It's going to be up to a judge to decide whether Priti Patel, relying on a 2004 law, is going to be able to do this or not. But the reason is, I suggest the local by-elections are coming. They want a challenge to succeed. There can be no reason for setting a flight on the 14th of June when all the machinery for it comes in on the 28th.
Yeah, but by definition, that means it's popular. If the argument is that they want to get this in before the local elections as a way of getting more people to vote for them, then it means that most people clearly want this to happen, Arja.
Yeah, but then they should have had the machinery in place before that. They've been going on about it for ages. So that, or, you know, you can't just do it to convenience of the by-election. So that's what a judge is going to do. If they'd said it on the 29th, it'd be too late for the by-election. So it is about votes, and it is about pandering. And if this flight doesn't take off, then she hasn't done her job. Someone's been incompetent here.
Look, that is a good point, which is, that, I suppose, the double-edged sword of that, which is that if this flight doesn't take off, by virtue of trying to have maybe got it in before the by-election, then it could backfire, couldn't it, quite badly? But
and she hasn't done the job.
Over to you, Al. I'm not convinced that when you look at the numbers of people that we might end up sending to Rwanda, is it that much of a deterrent, actually? Because most people who come across the channel will still be able to realise that they are probably not going to be sent anywhere.
Ultimately, on its own, as I've said before, Rwanda's not going to be enough. However, if there are people being sent to Rwanda and it turns out to be a significant number, in addition to other measures that will be introduced, I think that it will have a deterrent effect. So far, nothing has happened. And actually, the government, to be fair to it, has taken account of these sort of challenges. So in the end, it will be up to the courts to decide whether this is being done in accordance with our laws. But I don't think you can just simply disregard the legislation that has only been passed in the last few weeks, even though some aspects of it won't actually take effect until the 29th, 28th of June.
Yeah, indeed. Now, Harder, I find it very, very difficult for people to make the case that these kind of legal challenges are about the law and that they're not ideological, because some of the groups bringing them are things like Care for Calais, etc. So these are basically pressure groups, right? And they instruct lawyers, and that's why they try to uphold it. So this isn't really about the law, is it? This is about politics.
Every case in front of a judge is about the law, Patrick. So it's about the law. If someone's trying to implement the law or use the law, they need to make sure they get it right. Otherwise, they are breaking the law. And we know what happens when it breaks the law. This government doesn't have a regard for the law. We know that. We've debated that so many times on GBNews itself. And what should happen is, if someone has failed to do their job, they should either resign or they should be sacked. If me or you had made this mistake in a private company, we'd be out on our ear. It's almost like me giving you a credit card or a debit card and saying, Patrick, go away, swipe away in the shops. You go to the shops, it's declined, and you look at it, why is it declined? And they say, well, it doesn't start till July 2022, and you're using it in June 2022. And now what the government is going to say, well, it's not our fault, it's the shopkeeper's fault, it's the credit card company's fault. But actually, it's the government's fault in this. They're trying to do something which might break the law. They've got lawyers, the government have got access to the same lawyers, better lawyers than perhaps what the migrants have. And therefore, they should be knowing that, look, this is possible, this isn't, these are the dates, these are the deadlines. Instead, it seems as if they want this challenge to succeed because it might be a vote winner for them to blame the lawyers, blame the activists, blame the charities, when in fact it's their incompetence.
All right, go on, Alp. I can see you're itching to get involved.
Well, I think that too much is being made of elections coming up. I really don't think that has very much to do with it. In politics, there are always going to be efforts made to win elections. In this particular case, this is not something new. And let's not forget what you mentioned in your opener, Patrick, that there are already this year over 10,000 who've crossed the channel illegally, and it is illegally. They're coming in flimsy boats. They're leaving from unauthorized embarkation points. Of course, it's illegal. And they're also, as we saw over the last few days, actually risking the lives of babies and toddlers. That is absolutely abhorrent as far as I'm concerned. And the sooner we can put a stop to it, the better.
OK, look, both of you, thank you so much. Great stuff. That always an absolute pleasure. Harjap Singh Bangal there, and, of course, the chairman of Migration Watch, Alp Mehmet, as well. Getting stuck into that Rwanda deal right at the top. And I'm going to go to some of your views now. GBViews at gbnews.uk. Marianne's been on. Thank you very much, Marianne. Agreeing with a lot of the points that I made in my monologue. Lovely stuff. You'd like to see it. Basically saying that these people are not coming here for anything other than basically an easier life. It's Marianne's view, of course. Saying that they've passed through numerous safe countries. And this is a really common view, Marianne, isn't it, really? That actually, you know, there isn't a war in France. And I always say, because if there was, they'd have already surrendered. And then they say, no, you can't say that on national television. But, yes, loads of people getting in touch as well about this. As the tax-paying public, Robert says this, and this is what I'm saying as well, right? When it comes to things like the Rwanda deal, I believe, anyway, correct me if I'm wrong, tell me if I'm wrong, I believe that the vast majority of people just want this sorted, right? And they just want a couple of planes to take off, because if it doesn't, it could be a nail in Boris Johnson's coffin. And Robert seems to think exactly the same thing. Phil's been on to talk about the people traffickers as well, human traffickers, and that's a real concern that I've got, right? Whilst people pontificate over whether or not we should be sending anyone to Rwanda, whether or not Rwanda is a safe third country, or this, that and the other, and lawyers, frankly, maybe make a lot of money out of it. We know who else is making money out of it, of course, human traffickers. And from where I'm sitting, it does appear the people who want to put the skids on the Rwanda deal seem to me, anyway, to be more on the side of human traffickers than they do to be on the side of humanity. Get in touch, GBViews at gbnews.uk. After the break, the big smoking debate, that's right. The legal age for buying cigarettes could be increased to 21. We'll be asking whether or not it's the right thing to do. Is the state getting unnecessarily involved in our lives? Don't go away.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGibbon from the Met Office. Dry and bright in the east with some sunshine, cloudier further west with some rain. Not a huge amount of rain. The weather front that's moving into the west is a relatively weak feature, but it is attached to an area of low pressure which is relatively deep for the time of year. We don't often see lows like this in early June, and it will bring some windy weather later Thursday and through the next couple of days. But for the time being, light winds, sunny spells in the east of England. Central and eastern Scotland also largely dry and bright. Just a few showers for Aberdeenshire, Caithness and Sutherland. Cloudier skies for western England, Wales and the far west of Scotland, with some outbreaks of rain, mostly on the light side. Clearing from Northern Ireland, warming up here, and warm in the east, 21 to 23 Celsius. But where we've got the cloud and rain, more like mid to high teens. The rain moves east and then generally just peters out overnight, although there could still be a few drizzly showers affecting the south and southeast of England, 1 or 2 showers further west and northwest as well. But with a increased breeze, well, temperatures will stay up. Teens for many, and a mild night to come with the cloud and the breeze towards the southeast, 16 Celsius as we begin things on Friday. Friday starts off bright enough, with still 1 or 2 showers for the far southeast, but increasingly the showers become focused across Scotland and Northern Ireland. Some heavy downpours here and an increased wind. A very windy day for the Western Isles with the risk of coastal gales. Breezy for all, but actually relatively warm towards the south, 21 to 24 Celsius possible, whilst we'll see high teens for Scotland and Northern Ireland at best. The showers in Scotland and Northern Ireland push into the far north of England, North Wales, to Friday evening. And then Saturday sees a similar kind of day with showers for the northwest, drier and brighter elsewhere, but still very breezy.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere. We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Yes, a very good morning, everybody. It's about to go 10:24. There it is. OK, good morning. This is To The Point with me, Patrick Christie's on GB News. We're live on your TV, online and radio this morning. Now, the government could be set to increase the legal age for buying cigarettes to 21. This is part of a review commissioned by the Health Secretary, Sajid Javid, undertaken by former Barnardo's chief executive, Javid Khan. Well, the review also proposed additional taxes on tobacco companies as part of the government's plan to tackle smoking and make England smoke-free by 2030. Should the government be taking such aggressive measures to deter people from lighting up, or are we all grown-ups and we can make our own decisions, including even the bad ones, right? So joining me now to discuss this in more detail are Christopher Snowdon, Head of Lifestyle Economics at the Institute of Economic Affairs, and John Dicey as well, Global CEO and Senior Therapist at Alan Carr's Easy Way. You're here with me in the studio as well. Fantastic stuff. There you go. Well, look, thanks both for joining us. Christopher, I'll start with you, please, my good man. This idea now of, going smoke-free by 2030, I mean, is it actually ever going to work?
Well, it depends on what people want to do, doesn't it, really? I mean, you've got 13-14% of the population are smokers at the moment. Around about half of them say that they'd like to give up at some point. So you've got basically, too many people who have no intention of giving up to get down to 5%. But it could change. People are switching to vaping in quite large numbers. So, yeah, we shall see. I mean, this was just a target that Theresa May just slipped out. There wasn't even a vote on it or anything like that. And now it's being treated as if it's gospel.
Yeah, no, indeed. And as well, I'll just throw over to you now, John. The idea of raising the, age of consent when it comes to cigarettes, to 21 years old, I think some people would think is a little bit rum, really.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to that. I think it's one of those policies where there's sort of positive elements to it and negative ones as well, sort of in overreach terms. I think it's a shame that it will make perhaps cigarettes seem more sort of like forbidden fruit to younger kids growing up or whatever, and the next thing to elevate to after whatever else they're doing, vaping or whatever else, moving on to the next level.
Yeah.
But we support anything that sort of helps people avoid starting smoking in the first place. Whether it does that or not, I really don't know. I think it'd be a long time coming. So I know there's a lot more measures likely to follow. I think what I'd like to see is just helping people quit smoking, particularly with crisis of income drop and taxes going up and whatever. Then sort of a household with smoker in is losing out on even a light smoker, maybe $2,000 a year, something like that.
Yeah.
It's a huge levelling up process that can be done by actually exciting smokers and saying, why don't you quit now?
Yeah, maybe do it that way. Maybe kind of do more of the incentive as opposed to the, I suppose, the stick approach. I mean, every single time on cigarettes as well, you see pictures of obviously all the just horrendous stuff, really, don't you? All the time. And Christopher, I'd like to just lob it back to you, really, mate, because the fact is, everyone knows that smoking's bad for you. That's pretty obvious. There's no branding on the packets anymore, of course. In fact, it's just pictures of things like tumours and dead people, right? So if people do want to actually smoke, then surely you just let them do it. We're all aware of the risk. We're adults.
Well, that's the point, isn't it? We're adults, and so with this idea of raising the age to 21, either you've got to argue that people are not adults until they are 21, in which case you need to change a lot of legal ages for gambling and drinking and driving and having all sorts of things, or you are arguing that adults don't actually have the right to smoke, in which case you should make that case openly and say that you want to ban the sale of cigarettes. I have to say that, judging by some of the reports this morning, this seems to be a developing story. It's not just that this guy who's doing the independent review wants to raise the age to 21. He actually wants to raise the legal age every year, so that people who are under 18 today will never be allowed to smoke. Apparently, this is what's going to be in this report, along with quite a few other crackpot ideas. So it seems to me this is just ludicrous idea. In 20 years' time, people are going to be getting ID'd, and news agents are going to be saying, "You sure you're 38? You look like you're 37 to me." So it looks like there's quite a few weird ideas in this, and that's because they can't do anything other than just go after very directly now the smokers. The plain packaging thing was portrayed as being regulation of industry. The display ban was portrayed as regulation of industry. Advertising ban similarly. Now they're just directly going after people and saying, "We are going to ban you from ever buying cigarettes."
They are, and it's interesting because New Zealand have done something quite similar, haven't they? So they'll ban the sale, I'm just reading this, they'll ban the sale of tobacco to its next generation. So you'll end up with some, 45-year-old guy in a car park outside an offie, desperately trying to find a guy who's 46 years old so he can go in and get some facts, which I think is absolutely ludicrous. But there we go. John, just in terms of people actually wanting to quit smoking, I mean, I know that, obviously we're talking about a very serious topic here, of course, and for a lot of people, well, it's an addiction by definition for a lot of people. You're obviously in the therapy world. What do you recommend to people as a way to try to kick the habit?
Well, I think there's so much help available now, and most of it's sort of related to nicotine replacement therapy, nicotine patches, gum, vaping, that kind of thing. Lots of people have tried that, so I'm really pushing forward drug-free approaches that change the way you look at smoking and how you look at stopping smoking. So most smokers approach the subject with trepidation. I used to be an 80-a-day smoker, and eventually,
Hang on a
and I was
minute.
ashamed to admit that.
80 a day?
Yeah, I'm horrific to admit that.
Goodness me.
Yeah, and
Which is when you could smoke inside and stuff, though, presumably.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
so it was just on the go all the time.
Chain smoking, and I eventually sort of gave up even trying. I thought it was impossible to quit. And you get into that stage as a smoker where it's almost hopeless. You kind of go into it. Once you've tried everything else, what do you do? And that's where it's kind of cognitive method that actually gets you excited about stopping smoking rather than nervous and apprehensive about it, and actually illustrating how people can find it easy to stop smoking rather than a lifelong of misery without cigarettes is really important, and that's what we do at Alan Carr. We're proud to do that. So I think lots of government interventions coming, even the digital ones, are going to focus on smart stuff, apps and that kind of thing, which probably aren't going to help the people most in need of it. People with phones which are kind of like 3, 4, 5 years out of date won't support the apps. They won't know necessarily how to use the apps. So, I mean, our digital services, for example, just click a link, and it's as simple as that, whether it's a live service or online video program. So I think making it really easy for smokers to have a go at quitting smoking is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, both of you, thank you so much. Really good chat, that. I loved to see it. Christopher Snowden there, Head of Lifestyle Economics at the Institute of Economic Affairs. The IEA have been all over the media today. Anyway, John Dicey as well, Global CEO and Senior Therapist at Alan Carr's Easy Way. Living proof, actually, that your methods do work. So there you go. Well done, my good man. Thank you both very much for joining us. Where do you stand on this, ladies and gentlemen, this big smoking debate? Should the age of, I suppose, consent, really, be raised to 21? It just seems a bit high, that, doesn't it? Because what I think is difficult for a lot of people who want this kind of thing to marry up, OK, is the idea that a lot of these people, for me, seem to be on the political spectrum where they seem to want the voting age reduced to things like 16 years old. So you're either an adult or you're not at the age of 16. And I find this a bit strange. How would you feel about the smoking age being raised to 21? Make GB views at gbnews.uk. Alcohol costs this country a lot more than smoking. This is the views of Alan. Damage, assaults, drunk driving. He says also domestic abuse as well. He says he's an ex-smoker, but it annoys me that alcohol never gets talked about. Well, we do talk about alcohol a fair bit on the show, to be fair, Alan, but there we go. And yes, raising the smoking age. Not old enough to make a choice, but old enough to decide whether or not you want to be male or female at 4 years old. That's from Nigel, I think, alluding to some of the things that's going on in primary schools and our education system, I suppose. That's an interesting point, Nigel, isn't it? How can you be able, I suppose, to make serious decisions about, well, frankly, your gender as a child without even needing the consent of your parents, but you've got to be 21 before you can buy a Decker Camel Blues. Anyway, after the break, petrol prices are hitting £2 a litre in some garages. How are you coping with the increases affecting us all this? So get in touch as well. GBViews at gbnews.uk. Are you feeling the heat at the pump? But before that, a look at this morning's news.
It's 10:33. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. A government-commissioned review into smoking recommends the age at which people can buy legally tobacco in England should be raised from 18 by 1 year every year. It says the annual raise should continue until no one can buy cigarettes. It's estimated there are 7 million smokers across the UK. The government's determined to deliver on its manifesto pledge to have a smoke-free Britain by 2030, which means getting smoking rates down to 5% or less. The average price of filling up a typical family car has surpassed £100 for the first time. The RAC says it's a truly dark day for drivers, as the average price for a litre of petrol reached a record 182 pence and diesel reached a record 188 pence. It's after the biggest daily jump in petrol prices for 17 years. The Prime Minister is set to announce plans for lower-paid workers to use housing benefits to buy their homes. Boris Johnson will make a speech in Lancashire later and is expected to say he'll extend the right to buy scheme for housing association tenants. Experts are warning that shortages in cancer doctors across the country could lead to delays in patients getting diagnosed. A report by the Royal College of Radiologists shows a 17% shortfall of specialists across the UK, which could increase to 26% in the next 4 years. The number of jobs offering a 4-day week has gone up by 90%. Job site CV Library says the charity sector, sales, catering and distribution have seen the biggest rise in adverts. TV online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound is 1.252 to the dollar. It's 1.169 to the euro. And the price of gold currently stands at £1,477.58 per ounce.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News, investments that matter.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere. We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Very good morning, everybody. It's 10:37. This is To The Point with me, Patrick Christie's, right here on GB News, and we're live on your TV, online and radio this morning. So, many of our viewers, of course, and listeners got in touch yesterday to share their stories on how they're making changes to deal with the cost of living crisis. The price of petrol is affecting so many of you. It's skyrocketed to an average, gosh, get this, of 180.7p per litre, which is nuts, isn't it? In some garages, it's even reached £2 per litre. The average price of diesel has also risen by almost 1.5 pence to a record high of 186.6p per litre. The government say that they're considering naming and shaming fuel retailers who don't pass on the cuts in fuel duty to drivers. Do get in touch now to share how you're coping with the rising cost of fuel crisis. GB Views at GBNews.uk. But we're going to cross over now to our Scotland reporter, Davy Donaldson, who's in Stirling, which is ironic given how much pound sterling it's costing us to fill our cars up, and East Midlands reporter Will Hollis as well, who's at a petrol station in Nottinghamshire. Davy, I'll start with you. What's the crack like where you are?
Yeah, I'm actually at Bothwell Services in Hamilton in South Lanarkshire. I was in Stirling earlier on today, but the prices here, $199.9 for both diesel and petrol, so astronomical prices, absolutely incredible, and I'm sure that motorists on the way down to England and those on the way up to Scotland from England will be looking at this and thinking, oh my God, that is a lot to be paying for fuel. Earlier on today I was at Stirling Services, and it's even worse there, 202.9 for unleaded and 204.9 for diesel, so I mean that is really bad. I suppose it is a service station, so perhaps you kind of expect some increase, but maybe not of that magnitude. But yeah, it's really hitting people hard. You know, we've got a cost of living crisis that we're dealing with at the moment. Also in Scotland at the moment there's a train dispute between ScotRail and drivers. Good to see that earlier this morning that there's going to be another round of talks there, but you know there have been cancellations, so you know the option there to take a train isn't there because they're a bit unreliable at the moment. You know, a third of services have been cut by ScotRail, which was nationalised by the Scottish Government only at the start of April. We've also got the looming 3 strikes for the RMT as well, so you know a lot of people will be looking at these strikes and thinking, well, I'd like to take my car. The problem being is, of course, the huge cost of fuel at the moment.
OK. Go on, Will.
Yeah, and well, here in the East Midlands, we're not seeing quite so high prices in some parts. Where I am in Nottingham, it's £1.89 for the litre of petrol. That's for your unleaded. It's £1.92 at this Texaco garage here for your diesel. Of course, it's not something that you want to be seeing at all, but the latest news that we've been hearing from the RAC is that it's reached that point now where for a family car it's £100 to fill up a tank. On Monday we saw the fastest increase ever on record, 2.2 pence for a single day, and the RAC said it's only a few pence off of becoming £100 for that quite large sum that we've just talked about there. So it's a really worrying thing. It's something that the RAC has described as a thoroughly depressing day. Now where we are, this might be a little bit less than you might find on some parts of the M1 or the A1, both key roads across through Nottinghamshire as well as large parts of the country. But the M1 is actually in that direction, so I'm sure probably quite a lot of people will be looking at these prices and thinking, how much cheaper is this going to be compared to those big motorways where you know you are going to see those price increases? And I think a lot of people are going to be starting to use those apps, those different pricing indexes where they can look at where it's a little bit cheaper, if only a few pence to get your petrol. But we know that that £2 figure is very much so not just if it's going to happen, but when a lot of people are expecting that £2 to come in near future.
Yeah, look, Will, thank you very, very much. Both of you, thank you very, very much as well. I think it really brings it home to people, doesn't it, actually, exactly how bad this cost of living crisis is getting. That was our Scotland reporter there, Davy Donaldson, and our East Midlands reporter as well, Will Hollis. How's it affecting you, ladies and gentlemen? Look, I'm going to be honest about how it's affecting me. I'm just not driving anymore. My car is essentially sitting outside my flat like a wreck, basically, just because I don't want to move it. I don't want to take it off the drive. And if I then moved into more central London than where I live now, because I'm a bit out in the sticks at the minute, it would cost me money every single time I took it off the driveway. So before it even filled it up, Sadiq Khan would hammer me with some kind of congestion charge. But let me know how things are going for you. GBViews at GBNews.uk. Lots of you getting in touch about what we spoke about earlier, actually. About two things, really. Two things to kick off the show. The Rwanda deal and what's going on in terms of potentially anyway, raising the smoking age to 21. Christine's been on about the smoking. Just how will a total smoking ban work in the UK? Does that mean any future foreign holiday maker to the country will be policed, or will it be as it is now? And that's interesting, really. You know, a total smoking... Britain going smoke-free by 2030. It's not going to happen, is it? And it does wind me up a little bit, this stuff, really, because I think it's not as if people don't realise already that smoking is bad for you. It's pretty obvious, it's pretty bleeding obvious that smoking is bad for you. You can't move for anti-smoking adverts now. On the top of every single deck of fags, there is, of course, a picture, normally, of something pretty horrific. So the idea that anyone goes, oh, I think I'm going to take up smoking because it's good for my health, is a little bit nuts. But actually, do we have to ban it? Is that where we are, really, now? I disagree. I think people need to be able to make their own choices. And people say, well, you know, they clog up the NHS. All right, well, so do fat people. So do people with various different kind of problems as well. And smokers, by definition, pay quite a lot of tax. GBViews at GBnews.uk. Get those views coming in. And Alan's been on about the Rwanda deal. I opened up earlier on to say I've got some reservations about this Rwanda deal because I'm not convinced that actually we're going to get off the ground any time soon. The first flights are supposed to take off on June the 14th, which is a few days away, really, isn't it? And classic, the lefty lawyers get on their soapbox, they try to delay, they try to dither, and they try to block it. And people go, it's about the law. In my opinion, it's not about the law, because these are groups like Care for Calais. Well, they're pressure groups, OK? They're people with an ideology and with a political agenda who instruct lawyers to act on their behalf. Therefore, it's not really about the deep-seated principle of our legal system. It's more about an ideology. But Alan says, start it now. Get these lefty lawyers back in their boxes, he says. They says they're ruining the country, and that's, of course, Alan's view. But let's take you through now some of the headlines of the day that you may well have missed. So, I love this bit of the show. We just kind of pick up weird and wacky stories, really. Forensic science students have been warned that they will be exposed to images of murder and violence during their lectures. Yeah. Many universities have included a content warning on the course to prepare undergrads for graphic material, saying the content is integral to the module. But this is not the first time universities are making students aware of upsetting material, is it? No, as warnings have been given in law, politics, photography courses previously, for example. However, critics say that the growing use of warnings stifles debate and treats students like children. I mean, I would politely suggest that if you decided to go to university to study forensic sciences, right, and you had to be warned about the idea that at some point you might look at a dead body, I would suggest maybe you shouldn't be at university. I mean, I would have thought that maybe is the answer there. But yeah, trigger warnings and everything. They're putting trigger warnings on things like Shakespeare plays now, like Julius Caesar, where, spoiler alert, ladies and gentlemen, by the way, you've only had about 400 years to get to know the plot twist at the end. But when Julius Caesar gets stabbed to death, and they're saying that, yeah, now apparently you have to have a trigger warning on that just in case anyone gets offended by that, which I think is a little bit weird. But anyway, there was probably a time we felt a little bit sorry for Theresa May. We're moving on now. But maybe not anymore, because the former Prime Minister is raking in £109,000 for a 5-hour speaking engagement in Denmark. Goodness gracious me, I used to think Denmark was quite cool, but now clearly it's very, very dull. It continues a profitable run since leaving 10 Downing Street with a staggering 641 grand earned for just 54 hours of work since the start of this year alone. I mean, that is a cracking hourly rate. In fact, it's an hourly rate of almost £12,000. And she's now earned more than £2.1 million on the speaking circuit since July 2019. I would pay Theresa May to not speak at my event, personally. I mean, it'd be so boring, wouldn't it? It's like kind of shopping at B&Q on a rainy Sunday. It's the occasional table, isn't it? We might as well hear from that lamp over there. I just don't really quite get why she's raking this amount of money in. But fair play to her. What I do find interesting, though, about Theresa May is she was in this very office, actually, different a different company she was with. But I was desperately trying to get in touch with her about the migrant crisis, migrant hotels, and specifically, anyway, one that's in her constituency in Maidenhead. And she was refusing to talk to me about it. She was refusing to talk to anyone about it. We even just waited outside ages for her. But, of course, I suppose maybe what I should have done is pay her 12 grand, and she'd have spoken to me for at least an hour. But there we go. Anyway, there's loads of people getting in touch on all this stuff. Get in touch with us as well. GBViews at gbnews.uk. We've got loads coming your way for the remaining hour or so of this show. And, of course, now we're just going to do something a little bit different at the end. So a firefighters' union leader has expressed frustration at the progress of the Grenfell Tower inquiry, OK? So shift in tone now, people. He says he's not helpful, basically, that it will lead... Not hopeful, sorry, that it will lead to significant change, and has slammed those trying to pin the blame for the tragedy on firefighters. Matt Rack, who's General Secretary of the Fire Brigades Union, said, and I'm quoting now, "We'll continue to try to make sure that blame for the Grenfell Tower tragedy is apportioned to those who are truly responsible and not the firefighters who gave their all, often risking their own lives trying to save residents who were trapped in their homes." Well, next week, unfortunately, marks the 5-year anniversary of the Grenfell Tower tragedy. And I'm joined now by Lucy Masood, a former firefighter, now a barrister at Staple Inn Chambers. Thank you very, very much, Lucy. Great to have you back on the show, actually. Look, gosh, I didn't realise it's 5 years. Where have those 5 years gone? I mean, I remember exactly where I was. I was living in Maida Vale in London when, which is not a million miles away, of course, from Grenfell, when it first went up in flames, really. I remember waking up at night with the helicopters going overhead, everything, and it really does not feel like 5 long years ago. But is it really true that people are blaming firefighters in some way?
Yes, unfortunately that is the case, and that was the case quite early on. Now, I remember sort of speaking to Matt Rack and other people within the union at the time of the fire. Of course, I was a firefighter based at Chelsea Fire Station, which is very close to Grenfell. Many of my colleagues attended the scene and still suffer from the effects of having to attend that to these days. Now, there was a lot of negativity came out towards the firefighters. To be fair, we expected it. We thought the narrative is going to change. You know, the first few weeks and months after the tragedy, it was, you know, the firefighters did a brilliant job. We thanked them so much. We knew at some point that narrative would change and blame would be...
Why, though? Sorry to interrupt. The reason I am interrupting is because I just do not understand it. What do you think? Is it what? Politicians trying to shift the blame away from themselves or something like that? Is that what it is?
Absolutely, because if we look at the causes to Grenfell, and now admittedly there's an inquiry ongoing, so I wouldn't want to speculate too much, but we know that we had a building in the middle of the richest borough in Europe that was covered in illegal flammable cladding. Now, decisions have been made that allowed that cladding to be put on that building, decisions that have been made through decades of consecutive governments of taking those decisions, and politicians just didn't care at the end of the day. Had Grenfell been in a posh part of London, well, obviously Kensington's a posh part of London, but had Kensington been in Canary Wharf and had sort of, you know, the majority of middle class residents, guaranteed it would not have been covered in cladding. So when this fire happened, the FBU, quite rightly, were asking serious questions. How could this tragedy happen? But it wasn't too long before the politicians who were being blamed, rightly so, for this tragedy, started to shift the blame onto the firefighters. Now, what's incredible, you mentioned it's been 5 years. What's incredible is that we're 5 years on, we're midway through a public inquiry, 73 people, when men, women and children burned to death in their beds, 5 years on, and the only person who's been brought to account for that fire and who's lost their job is a firefighter, and that was Danny Cotton. Not one other person has been brought to account, and that is disgraceful.
Can I ask you, and I don't want you to, I don't know, we'll just only say what you're comfortable with, obviously, but, I mean, the firefighters who attended that scene, there was, I think, for me, one of the most, I say I need to say the word iconic, of course, that makes it sound like a positive, of course it isn't, bits of footage that emerged from that tragedy was when the firefighters, some of them anyway, were coming out, and they were coming out in a row right afterwards, most of them in tears, OK, getting largely a round of applause from the people who had either had presumably loved ones dead or lost everything. You must speak to people who were in that building that day. What are some of their stories?
They just have never gotten over it. I mean, you had firefighters who were sent into the building, and by the way, the building was completely not fit for purpose. So you had the first floor, which I believe was a gym. It didn't have flats, and then the second floor and third floor were also not necessarily flats, but there weren't even numbers on the floor. So when the firefighters were being sent in, they were being told that there's a family on the fourth floor. They couldn't even tell where the fourth floor was because there was no numbers, and all the floors were mixed up because there was a mezzanine. Now those firefighters who did go in, they were so under-resourced on the night, I would say. Of course, it's for the inquiry to eventually decide on. But I would say they were so under-resourced on the night. They were going in and they were literally having to make decisions about who they would leave and who they would save because there just wasn't enough firefighters on the night. We're talking about the borough of Kensington that up until the fire took place, leading up to the fire took place, had massive fire cuts. They'd had 50% reduction in fire cover in that borough alone.
Yeah, well, I can see that absolutely, and see they had to make difficult decisions, didn't they, about whether or not to leave people or save people, and they must really struggle with that. When they by the time that the fire brigade got there, were people already legging it out? Was it just chaos?
Of course, it was a situation like no other. We've never seen a fire like that in this country. Now, bearing in mind, there's a lot of controversy around the stay put policy. I don't work for the London Fire Brigade anymore.
Isn't it, actually? Because they were people were told to stay where they were, weren't they?
Absolutely, and it's not my job to say whether the stay put policy is a good thing or not. However, what I would say is when the building is fit for purpose and the building works as it should do, the stay put policy is absolutely the appropriate policy in place. The difficulty was this building in the richest borough in Europe wasn't fit for purpose. It was covered in illegal cladding. It was a death trap waiting to happen.
Yeah, and also, as well, what happened at Grenfell. I mean, by the way, we're quite near this here, so regularly, if I was driving out on a job yesterday, for example, I drive past the Grenfell Tower most days, really, actually, and it's still a visible kind of symbol, really, there. It's just there, and you cannot ignore it. OK, they wrap it in a kind of white banner with a green heart on it, but you know what's on the other side of that banner, and you know what happened in there, and you can't really ignore that. But Lucy, thank you so much. Lucy Massoud there, former firefighter, now a barrister at Staple Inn Chambers. Thank you so much for joining us on the show. And you know what? It's not just people in Grenfell, of course, who are affected by this. There's a lot of this cladding issue going about. In fact, near my neck of the woods originally in Manchester, there's a lot of this happening where people have bought new flats, right? So new flats, new blocks of flats. They've paid, a considerable sum of money for that. Let's say £500,000 or something like that, 400 grand. It's a lot of money. And then all of a sudden it's got this illegal cladding on it, right? And it's their responsibility to have to pay to get that removed. And a lot of people don't have that kind of money, and you can't sell the flat until you've had it removed as well, which is absolutely bonkers. Anyway, GBViews at gbnews.uk. Big hour that we've just had here, people. It's whizzed by. We covered the Rwanda deal. I want to get your views on that as well, so make sure that you get in touch. But a little reminder as well, of course, every single Wednesday we hand our show over to you. It's your show, full of your ideas, what you want us to talk about, so get those ideas coming into us for next week, please. GBViews at gbnews.uk. I will be back after the weather.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGibbon from the Met Office. Dry and bright in the east with some sunshine, cloudier further west with some rain. Not a huge amount of rain. The weather front that's moving into the west is a relatively weak feature, but it is attached to an area of low pressure which is relatively deep for the time of year. We don't often see lows like this in early June, and it will bring some windy weather later Thursday and through the next couple of days. But for the time being, light winds, sunny spells in the east of England. Central and eastern Scotland also largely dry and bright. Just a few showers for Aberdeenshire, Caithness and Sutherland. Cloudier skies for western England, Wales and the far west of Scotland with some outbreaks of rain, mostly on the light side. Clearing from Northern Ireland, warming up here and warm in the east, 21 to 23 Celsius. But where we've got the cloud and rain, more like mid to high teens. The rain moves east and then generally just peters out overnight, although there could still be a few drizzly showers affecting the south and southeast of England, 1 or 2 showers further west and northwest as well. But with a increased breeze, well, temperatures will stay up. Teens for many and a mild night to come with the cloud and the breeze towards the southeast, 16 Celsius as we begin things on Friday. Friday starts off bright enough, with still one or two showers for the far southeast, but increasingly the showers become focused across Scotland and Northern Ireland. Some heavy downpours here and an increased wind. A very windy day for the Western Isles with the risk of coastal gales. Breezy for all, but actually relatively warm towards the south, 21 to 24 Celsius possible, whilst we'll see high teens for Scotland and Northern Ireland at best. The showers in Scotland and Northern Ireland push into the far north of England, North Wales, to Friday evening. And then Saturday sees a similar kind of day with showers for the northwest, drier and brighter elsewhere, but still very breezy.
Join me, Gloria De Piero, Monday to Thursday at noon for The Briefing. We go to the parts of Parliament that you won't see elsewhere. Plus, there's exclusive interviews with MPs from all parties.
But quite often, they paper over the real truth. Why does a working class lad like you join the Tories?
That's a good question. Don't miss it. Monday to Thursdays at noon on GB News.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere. We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
A very good morning, everybody. It's just gone 11 o'clock. This is To The Point on GB News with me, Patrick Christys, on your TV, radio and, of course, online as well, with you all the way through until midday with an action-packed show full of the biggest stories, loads of chat, your views as well. What's not to love? Make sure you get in touch as well with your views. gbviews at gbnews.uk. I'll be going to those throughout the show, but first, it's time for your latest headlines.
Good morning, it's 11 o'clock. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. A government-commissioned review says those under 18 should never be able to legally buy tobacco. It recommends the legal age in England should be raised from 18 by 1 year every year until no one can buy it. The report also suggests tobacco firms are forced to pay a polluter tax to help smokers quit. It's estimated there are 7 million smokers across the UK. The average price of filling up a typical family car has surpassed £100 for the first time. The RAC says it's a truly dark day for drivers as the average price for a litre of petrol reached a record 182 pence and diesel reached a record 188 pence. It's after the biggest daily jump in petrol prices for 17 years. Senior Environmental Research Fellow at Imperial College, Malcolm Grimston, told GB News it's only going to get worse.
There's about a 2-week gap between the wholesale price of oil increases and that price going through to the pumps. And that's because we don't store a great deal of petrol. So when the price goes up, ultimately the pump price has to go up as well. The fundamental driver of this is the international oil situation. And there's no sign of it getting better. We don't know what's going to happen in Ukraine, but sanctions on Russia are likely to increase rather than decrease. It just shows that we didn't invest enough in robustness in the system to deal with these sorts of things during the good times. And we're now paying.
The Prime Minister is set to announce a string of housing reforms. They include plans for lower-paid workers to use housing benefits to buy their homes. Boris Johnson will make a speech in Lancashire later. It's expected he'll extend the Right to Buy scheme for housing association tenants. He'll argue £30 billion in housing benefit that currently goes towards rent could help people secure and pay for mortgages. Thousands of customers were provided an unacceptable service by electricity networks following Storm Arwen. A review by the energy watchdog Ofgem found many households were without power for more than 10 days. Some complained of poor communication from their suppliers about when they'd be reconnected. The storm, which carried winds of up to 100 miles per hour, left nearly 1 million homes in Britain without power in November last year. The government's confident their plans to unilaterally override parts of the Northern Ireland Protocol are legal. Foreign Office Minister James Cleverly has been responding to an urgent question over whether the government consulted a senior legal advisor, the First Treasury Council, on the plans. Labour MP Catherine West challenged Mr Cleverly, saying it would be careless to not seek legal advice.
It would be unprecedented for the First Treasury Council not to be consulted on an issue of this importance. This is the issue that runs to the heart of whether this government can be trusted to follow the rule of law.
Mr Speaker, the Government is confident that our plans abide to international law. The Government will be setting out its legal position in due course, and in accordance with the long-standing convention, we do not discuss legal advice given to Government.
A firefighters' union leader says he isn't hopeful that the Grenfell Tower inquiry will lead to significant change. Matt Rack, General Secretary of the Fire Brigades Union, has warned that lessons aren't being learned from fires in the UK. He says there are still many buildings with the same cladding as Grenfell Tower and that the removal process has been painfully slow. 2 British fighters who were captured by Russian forces in Ukraine could face 20 years in prison after appearing in court in the separatist region of Donetsk. In a video shared by Russian state media, Aidan Aslin and Sean Pinner allegedly admitted to training in order to carry out terrorist activities. Mr Pinner could also face the death penalty after allegedly admitting to seizing power by force. The libel claim made by the Duke of Sussex against the Mail on Sunday publisher is having its first hearing at the High Court. Harry's suing Associated Newspapers Limited after they published a story on his legal case against the Home Office. It was in regards to his security arrangements whilst visiting the UK. In his claim filed with the court, Harry said the piece published in February allegedly caused him substantial hurt and embarrassment. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens now, though. Let's return to Patrick with To The Point.
Good morning, everyone. It's 11:05. This is To The Point on GB News with me, Patrick Christie's, on your TV, radio and online. I've got a great show lined up for you for this final hour. So, here's what's coming up. A new poll claims the British public hugely overestimates the size of minority groups. And the clue's in the name there, really, isn't it? But there we go. So what impact would this have on social policy? Analyst Dr. Rakib Ahsan joins us later to give us his thoughts. Important story, that, I think, people. The cost of fuel is hitting dangerous highs as well. Our regional reporters will investigate how much you'll be paying across the country, while founder of Fair Fuel UK will also join me to discuss what more the government should be doing to bring prices back down again. And finally, Expert in counter-terrorism, Wazik will join me to discuss the ongoing protests erupting across the country over what is basically just a movie. I mean, I've got a lot of strong views on this, as you can imagine. I imagine you do as well. If you are, of course, listening to us on radio, it's essentially a lot of, well, I suppose Muslim men, really, sitting outside a Cineworld, getting very, very angry. But what does this film's backlash and banning mean for tolerance in this country? People have caved in, haven't they? And I'm sick of that. I've got all of that coming up and much, much more across the show. You can get in touch with your views as usual, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Well, first, though, the Prime Minister is trying to win some fans back with plans to increase home ownership. So, as the average house price reaches a record £289,099, Boris Johnson wants to extend the right to buy scheme, where those who are renting from housing associations can buy their homes at a discounted price. So the PM will also suggest that allowing those on housing benefits to use taxpayer money to pay off a mortgage is a good idea. This, of course, comes as he is urged to cut taxes to win favour back with members of his own party. Well, who better to have a chat with me about this than the one and only, the man himself, Tom Harwood, our political correspondent. Thank you very much, Tom. Look, I think just to explain to people really what's going on here.
Well, there was, I think, in order to contextualise what's happening today, we need to look at what happened on Monday.
OK.
And, of course, the Prime Minister faced a pretty seismic vote of confidence in him, and indeed those who voted no confidence reached the number of 148. Now, looking at that broad coalition of people who opposed the Prime Minister, it wasn't all about parties. It wasn't all about wine and cheese. That opened the door to this sense of frustration that many MPs have had over the last year and a half, 2 years of this government. The U-turns, indeed the pressure placed upon it, the lack of clear direction. And to some extent, Number 10's calculation here is the way to win back some of those who have lost faith in the Prime Minister's leadership is to try and provide a greater sense of direction, of vision, and of steadfastness. So today, we're expecting to hear a policy blitz, or at least the beginning of a policy blitz, where the Prime Minister will set out the areas in which he wants to see his government move faster to enact change. We're going to see some broad brushstrokes today, some areas of policy detail, for example, on housing, but more so pointing to where more will be announced over the coming days and weeks. We're expecting, for example, maybe next week, but probably looking more likely in 2 weeks' time now, a big announcement on the economy as well. Yeah, so Boris Johnson now, obviously, after the events of Monday, is his plan, as far as you're aware, to kind of reinvent himself like Madonna? I think to some extent he has been a victim of events for the last 2 years. His premiership got going with huge goodwill. He delivered a speech in February 2020 in Greenwich, which received huge praise, which was about sort of setting the course of his government, one that spoke about smashing mercantilism, spoke about free trade, spoke about open markets, and all of this got completely crushed the next month when coronavirus came along. And for ever since, he's been trying to sort of escape that legacy. His government has been one of high spending and indeed high taxation. Will he be able to move away from that reputation? That remains to be seen, because whilst he keeps mentioning he would like taxation to come down, we're also in parallel hearing this message that the government does not want to bring down taxation until it's sensible to do so. Of course, cutting taxes could lead to be an inflationary measure if the shortfall is met by borrowing or printing rather than cutting spending. So there are some worries with regard to cutting taxes, but there had been a huge amount of speculation as to whether or not the income tax rate cuts scheduled for 2024 might be brought forward, whether or not that corporation tax rise, a 6% rise in corporation tax scheduled for next year, will that be abandoned? Lots of questions there. I'm not sure we're going to hear the big answers on that today, though. We're going to hear the broad brushstrokes of policy to help with the cost of living, perhaps on childcare and particularly on housing too.
So obviously a lot of people want to tune in live to that right here on GB News, whether it's on radio, online or on their TV. And what time are we expecting this then?
Well, it's a bit of a movable feast. The time has already shifted twice so far today, but at the moment we're expecting sometime after 1 o'clock.
Sometime after 1 o'clock. Now, can I just ask you as well, obviously there's no confidence, or vote of confidence, I suppose you should say, really. I am unconvinced that Rishi Sunak will have voted for Boris Johnson. I don't know. Do you think there's a cabinet reshuffle in the offing here? Will he be looking at some members of his cabinet and thinking, actually, hang on a minute, you were given a straight choice as to whether or not you wanted me out the door, and you said yes?
This is a huge point of speculation, and there's a lot of wondering whether or not the rumour of a spreadsheet inside Number 10 is true. A spreadsheet of those who declared their public support for the Prime Minister on Monday and those who did not. Because there are some members of the government, not necessarily cabinet, but junior ministers, who did not declare that they had voted for the Prime Minister on Monday. They didn't declare that they'd voted against him, but they didn't declare that they'd voted for him. And there was a big whipping operation on Monday to get members of the government, members of the payroll vote, as it's called, to say that they'll be backing the Prime Minister publicly. Perhaps there'll be retribution for those who did not. And I suppose the other thing is there's a real tricky balance to strike when you come to a cabinet reshuffle. The one thing you do when you sack a minister is you make an enemy. And does the Prime Minister want to make more enemies now? Or does he, on the other hand, want to say, look, I'm going to reward those who were loyal to me, who stuck by me, who perhaps are not in cabinet now. We might bring some of those in who were the fervent supporters. So on the other side of the ledger, that could be a positive thing. However, a cabinet reshuffle is a big thing to do. It changes the mechanics of government. It shifts things in a big way. Does he want to do that to distract from the policy agenda right now? Probably not. Might he want to do it in the wake of potentially 2 by-election losses on the 23rd of June? That might be more of a realistic prospect.
What kind of impact do you think it would have if there are 2 by-election losses there? Because, I mean, obviously, you survived this vote, confidence vote now, and that buys him a bit of time, doesn't it, really? So will it actually have any impact? Have they already written it off?
There's 2 ways to look at this. Number one, these are Tory seats. They were one with a large majority, one with an all-right majority, but they represent 2 different voting coalitions. You've got the Red Wall seat in Wakefield in the north, held by Labour for a long time, and won by the Conservatives in the promise of Boris Johnson. His leadership represents winning over seats like Wakefield. And on the other hand, at the same time, Tiverton, down in the southwest, a seat that has been in Tory hands for quite some time, a seat that faces the Liberal Democrats, is a wealthier area, is a more well-to-do area, and one that is referred to now as the Blue Wall. These seats that are more potentially well-off and natural Conservative voters who feel potentially dismayed by Boris Johnson. Now, that's at risk to the Lib Dems. If these 2 seats fall, that could be quite a powerful representation of the collapse of the Tory voting coalition. If you're losing the wealthy South and the Red Wall, you have a problem there. However, on the other hand, we're mid-term, we're 2.5 years into a 5-year term government. You would expect the government to do poorly in by-elections, and in these 2 by-elections, you've got some pretty gruesome local factors. Right. In Wakefield, you have a Conservative, a former Conservative MP who was arrested and tried for child molestation.
Not
that
usually
is
clearly
going to have a big weighty impact on how people vote there.
So. Yeah.
And in Tiverton, of course, you have a resignation of a member of Parliament who admitted to watching pornography in the House of Commons chamber. Now, both of those 2 local factors may well play into those votes, and the Tories may well be saying that potentially these were never going to be easy ones to win. Even though they have been Tory seats that were won in 2019, the local factors may be to play here. And potentially Boris Johnson can almost explain his way out of that. The other point, I suppose, is that everyone expects that they're going to lose them. And so the expectations game can matter almost as much as the results game.
Tom, thank you very, very much, as ever. Tom Harwood there, our political correspondent. We're going to whiz it over. Keep it moving, people. Fast-paced show. This, our reporter, Rosie Wright, joins us now from Clapham in London to talk more about the Right to Buy scheme. Rosie, thank you very, very much. Great to have you on the show. So what you got for us?
Well, Patrick, we'll get much more of the detail later on when Boris Johnson makes that speech shortly after 1 o'clock. But what he's going to try to do is lay out policy and say, I don't want to talk about parties anymore. Here are some people-pleasing policies. And he's saying, I'm going to make it easier for people on lower incomes to buy their own home. It's an extension of the policy that first came into play under Margaret Thatcher in 1980. And right then, what they did was said, if you live in social housing, we will allow you, under set circumstances, to buy that home if you've lived there for a set period of time at a discounted price. Well, Boris Johnson looks like he's going to extend that scheme to people living in housing that's rental accommodation. If you are renting, that you could save up and pay for it. How will you get those savings? Well, another idea that we might hear from later is that your housing benefit could be used to help pay your mortgage. Well, earlier I spoke to a estate agent who was selling homes in 1980 under that Margaret Thatcher scheme to find out how it worked then, to see if it could work now. This is what he had to say.
It worked then. It was a beautiful windfall, an opportunity for people to own their properties. And a lot of them, I think, maybe probably stayed there, passed on to their children. But then a lot of people also sold up, moved out of London to be near children, grandchildren, be by the seaside, something I would love to do. Will it work now with the extension to the Housing Association? I think that it will create more stock in the property market to buy. How much of a difference it will make, I'm not entirely sure. It's very hard to know. It's partly because a lot of people do the right to buy and then let out the property.
So the analysis from James there was that might provide more stock for people to buy, but the major criticism of this policy and extending the number of people who'd be eligible for it is when those people, individuals, households, have bought that home, it's not being replaced at enough pace with new social housing for the people who really need it. Now, Boris Johnson says they're not only going to be building more homes, but they're going to be replacing them. We will get more clarity on it later on in that speech. But the other criticism from the Labour Party is that this is an old plan that you're just revamping, and you've tried this before and it didn't work. It was a promise that David Cameron made back in 2015. It's been part of the Conservative Manifesto pledge in 2019. Will they be able to action it? We'll find out a bit later. But right now, when people walking down high streets like this, looking at housing in the windows or going online to take a look, they're looking at prices. They are sky high right now. So they're looking to the government to say, what can you do to make sure that I can be able to afford my own home? Will Boris Johnson have the answers? We'll find out in a few hours.
Rosie, great stuff as ever. Thank you very much. Rosie Wright there reporting on this right to buy stuff. How are you finding the housing market at the moment, ladies and gentlemen? GB Views at gbnews.uk. I think there's a wider point here, though, isn't there? And it's about what Boris Johnson does now. Obviously, Monday was Monday, and, you know, a day is a long time in politics. A few days are a very long time in politics. And he wants to move on now, doesn't he, and put it to bed. The confidence vote, he wants to move on and rebrand himself, reinvent himself like Madonna, as I said earlier on. And that means he has to start doing some stuff, right? And he has to start behaving more, arguably anyway, like a Conservative, i.e. getting things right in the channel, doing things like this, lowering that taxation. But can he actually do it? How do you feel about this? Do you think that Boris Johnson can successfully move on from this? Are you still backing Boris? Do you ever back Boris? GB Views at gbnews.uk. But I'm going to go into that inbox right now. Lots of people getting in touch about something we're going to talk about very, very shortly, which is about this this film, The Lady in Heaven. I've not seen it myself personally, obviously. Anyway, so Cineworld were putting this film on, and it's deemed to be, well, let's put it this way. So let's get this right. The Bolton Council of Mosques, so you know it's good, they called the film blasphemous and underpinned with sectarian ideology. And so that's obviously from the Bolton Council of Mosques there. And anyway, they've been protesting outside Cineworld, saying this is absolutely outrageous. We don't want this film. And Cineworld have caved in, like most major corporations. When a few people get a bit angry, they just cave in, don't they? So they've pulled it for, quote, the safety of our staff and customers. We're going to be getting stuck into this because there's a lot to get stuck into here. First and foremost, if staff and customers are not safe at a Cineworld, shouldn't the police be stepping in to make sure that it is safe? Secondly, why aren't all these men at work? But there we go. Anyway, we've got loads of your views coming in as well. People get in touch about the fuel crisis. People get in touch about the Rwanda migrant deal. I'm not convinced it's ever going to get off the ground. The lefty lawyers have got involved, haven't they? GB Views at gbnews.uk. Also, the smoking debate. Is the smoking age going to be raised to 21? Lee's been on. Says, I smoked from the age of 15 and quit when I was 40. As a youth, I found as many ways to buy cigarettes as I could, and so will the youth of today. And I'm inclined to believe you, Lee. Well, after the break, a new poll reveals that Brits tend to overestimate the size of minority groups. I'll be joined by social policy analyst Dr. Akiva San to discuss this more after your weather.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGibbon from the Met Office. Dry and bright in the east with some sunshine, cloudier further west with some rain. Not a huge amount of rain. The weather front that's moving into the west is a relatively weak feature, but it is attached to an area of low pressure which is relatively deep for the time of year. We don't often see lows like this in early June, and it will bring some windy weather later Thursday and through the next couple of days. But for the time being, light winds, sunny spells in the east of England. Central and eastern Scotland also largely dry and bright. Just a few showers for Aberdeenshire, Caithness and Sutherland. Cloudier skies for western England, Wales and the far west of Scotland with some outbreaks of rain, mostly on the light side. Clearing from Northern Ireland, warming up here and warm in the east, 21 to 23 Celsius. But where we've got the cloud and rain, more like mid to high teens. The rain moves east and then generally just peters out overnight, although there could still be a few drizzly showers affecting the south and southeast of England, 1 or 2 showers further west and northwest as well. But with a increased breeze, well, temperatures will stay up. Teens for many and a mild night to come with the cloud and the breeze towards the southeast, 16 Celsius as we begin things on Friday. Friday starts off bright enough with still 1 or 2 showers for the far southeast, but increasingly the showers become focused across Scotland and Northern Ireland. Some heavy downpours here and an increased wind. A very windy day for the Western Isles with the risk of coastal gales. Breezy for all, but actually relatively warm towards the south, 21 to 24 Celsius possible, whilst we'll see high teens for Scotland and Northern Ireland at best. The showers in Scotland and Northern Ireland push into the far north of England, North Wales, to Friday evening. And then Saturday sees a similar kind of day with showers for the northwest, drier and brighter elsewhere, but still very breezy.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere. We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christys.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you, or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
Yes, a very good morning, everybody. It's just about to go 11:26. There we go. This is To The Point with me, Patrick Christie's on GB News. We're live on your TV, radio and online this morning. Now, for today's controversy feature, we bring you the results of a rather interesting poll. So, a YouGov survey has shown that the British public hugely overestimates the size of minority groups in the UK. I would have thought the clue was in the name there, but anyway, 1,800 people were polled and asked what percent of Britain's 67.2 million people belonged to what minority group, OK? So we've got some of the poll results here for you. On average, they believed that 5% of the UK's population were transgender. That would make it over 3 million people. The reality is, it's around 0.5%. They thought 20% of the population was black. Well, it's only 3%. They thought the number of Muslims was 15%. Apparently, it's actually just 4%. And they thought that 15% of us were gay or lesbian. Over 10 million people. You know what? It's actually less than 2%, at just over 1 million. So it turns out that we in Britain are, and this is obviously a shock to some, overwhelmingly cis, white, straight people. Yeah, there you go. Who would have thought it? So why do some of us think that we aren't? And what does this skewed thinking mean for social policy? And joining me right now is friend of the show, is Dr. Rakib Hassan, social policy analyst. Dr. Rakib, thank you very, very much. What's going on here then, really? So people overestimate, obviously, the size of minority groups. Does that mean that things like Pride or things like the Black Lives Matter movement, for example, were given too much prominence in our society, do you think?
Well, I think that, Patrick, it comes as no surprise to you that I believe that you have those niche identity political movements, and you also have what I consider to be these various forms of eco-activism, which are given incredible amounts of attention in the mainstream media. And I think that's in some part that's fed into these kind of figures. For example, the survey respondents, 1 in 5 think that Britain is black. 1 in 5, they also believe that 1 in 5 of the population is vegan. And you can also see that there's overestimations when it comes to what percentage they believe the population is Asian, Muslim, the percentage of people who belong to sexual minorities. And I just wonder whether that's almost an indication of the degree to which identitarian activism, how much of an impact it's had, especially when it comes to how mainstream media conducts its activities.
Yeah, no, exactly. But also, is there not an overrepresentation just in things like advertising, for example? Or, you know, so for example, when I watched the Queen's Jubilee party ceremony, the concert, right? And it seemed to me, anyway, like the vast majority of people who were on those stages were members of various different ethnic minority groups. Look, I've got absolutely no issue with that. Of course I haven't. I'm just saying that it wasn't, I don't think, representative of the realistic demographics of this country. When you look at adverts now, every single advert appears to be, it looks like the UN, the amount of different races and ethnicities and this, that and the other that are always there. So we are kind of being fed this stuff, aren't we?
Well, I think that a very important point that you make there, Patrick, you're talking about advertising and marketing. Where are they usually headquartered? I'd say many of those institutions which are associated with advertising and marketing, they're based in London. That means they may have a particular view on diversity. They may be of a particular political persuasion, and that in turn will, even though you think that shouldn't be the case, that may well have an impact on how they carry out their advertising and marketing operations on behalf of others. So I do think that you have that kind of dynamic where you have to see where institutions are based, especially when it comes to advertising and marketing, the degree to which particular political and social issues, to what extent are they platformed by the mainstream media. And I think that is feeding into these kind of survey figures that we're discussing today.
Yeah, indeed. And I wonder, it kind of seems a bit like a chicken and egg situation, isn't it? Because it kind of seems to feed itself a little bit with this. Just as a wider question, really, Dr. Rakib, we had some numbers there, really, didn't we, about, you know, the amount of people in this country of various different ethnic minority groups, etc., genders or sexual orientations. How do you think we are doing as a country in terms of the melting pot that is Britain? Are we actually getting it right, or do we find that we do have quite systemic issues here? Because that's obviously the line that we're being told.
Well, I think that when it comes to kind of issues we're discussing, advertising and marketing, I'd probably say there's a fundamental underrepresentation of white working class people, especially from the provinces and northern post-industrial towns. That's my personal observation. I think that we are a relatively successful multiracial democracy, and we should take pride in that. But we also have to see which kinds of groups are being culturally marginalised. And those feelings of social exclusion, within which groups are those feelings particularly severe. And I think that by doing that, you might come to the conclusion that many of those feelings of cultural marginalisation and social exclusion are in fact within left behind predominantly white British communities. And I think that if you want to live in a flourishing, inclusive, multiracial democracy, you have to address all feelings of exclusion. And that it can't just be feelings of exclusion within minorities. That also has to be within, you also have to look at where those feelings exist within the white majority.
Yeah, can I ask you something just a bit quite quickly? I know it's a big question to try to succinctly wrap up into a couple of minutes, but how do you feel about the concept of, like, white guilt? Because for me, this seems to be quite a big deal, right? When you look at the demographics of the people that dragged Edward Colston's statue into the river, I'm not saying there should have been a statue to rampant slave trader Edward Colston in the first place, but obviously dragging it into the river, of course they were, as far as I could see, white. And there seems to be a lot of white guilt going around. Is that a thing, do you think?
It's certainly a thing, and I find it insufferable, if truth be told. I think that we have far too many people in sort of metropolitan socially-liberal circles with their white saviour complex. This includes people who suggested that the Platinum Jubilee celebrations might be offensive towards ethnic and racial minorities.
Yeah,
which is absolutely remarkable. Bizarre, because I think the Queen's, Her Majesty the Queen's, her traditional messages, which emphasise family values, the importance of faith, community spirit, that resonate with many ethnic minority communities across the country. And I do feel that white guilt, I think quite often it's among middle-class social liberals who want to deflect attention away from their own feelings of privilege. They want to feel rebellious, they want to feel anti-establishment. But by doing so, quite often they throw patriotic and community-spirited ethnic minorities who have a deep love for their country under the bus. They don't represent those communities well at all, Patrick.
No, look, Dr. Rakib, always an absolute sensation to have you on the show. Thank you very much, Dr. Rakib Hassan there, social policy analyst. And he's absolutely spot on. Just quickly, because I'm going to lob it over to the news in a second, but I was really, really, really angry at some of the response from the usual types to our Jubilee celebrations, specifically the concert as well. That concert, as far as I could tell, was stages full of a massively racially diverse group of people, a massively sexually diverse group of people as well. There was even kind of rainbow confetti going off at one point. We all know what that stands for. The idea that that was in some way, shape or form kind of harking back to anything other than a massively inclusive event, I think is ludicrous. And people started tweeting, oh, you only have to walk around London today to see the demographics. You're like, well, we've just done a report there. We are mostly a white nation, right? And that's just the results of who we are as people. And therefore, it's not really a shock, is it, that if most people on the street at any given time happen to be mostly white. I just find that a bit bizarre. But anyway, thank you very much, everyone who's been getting in touch. GBviews at gbnews.uk. After the break, the cost of filling an average family car with petrol has hit record highs in some parts of the country. We will look into this a lot more after the headlines.
Thanks, Patrick. It's coming up to 11:35. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. The government says it will carefully consider an independent review into smoking, which recommends under 18s should never be able to legally buy tobacco. It suggests the legal age in England should be raised from 18 by 1 year every year until no one can buy it. The report also says tobacco firms should be forced to pay a polluter tax to help smokers quit. The average price of filling up a typical family car has surpassed £100 for the first time. The RAC says it's a truly dark day for drivers. The average price for a litre of petrol has reached a record 182 pence and diesel is at a record 188 pence. It's after the biggest daily jump in petrol prices for 17 years. The Prime Minister is set to announce plans for lower-paid workers to use housing benefits to buy their homes. Boris Johnson will make a speech in Lancashire later and is expected to say he'll extend the right to buy scheme for housing association tenants. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer says he doesn't believe the new measures will be effective.
The announcement today from the Prime Minister is the wrong approach. It is a reheated version of an idea that the government had back in 2015. They piloted it, it didn't work. And if ever you needed evidence that this divided government is completely out of ideas, it's this announcement today, which is simply reheating an old idea. They piloted it, it didn't work. They really are at the end of the road.
Experts are warning that shortages in cancer doctors across the country could lead to delays in patients getting diagnosed. A report by the Royal College of Radiologists shows a 17% shortfall of specialists across the UK, which could increase to 26% in the next 4 years. And the number of jobs offering a 4-day week has gone up by 90%. Job site CV Library says the charity sector, sales, catering and distribution have seen the biggest rise. TV online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News.
Direct Bullion sponsors the finance report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound is 1.253 to the dollar. It's 1.169 to the euro. And the price of gold currently stands at £1,476.39 per ounce.
Direct Bullion sponsors the finance report on GB News for physical investment.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you. And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Very good morning, everybody. It's 11:40. This is To The Point with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News, live as ever on your TV, online and radio this morning. Now, service stations across the country are having to charge over £2 per litre for petrol due to rising wholesale costs and global shortages. Now, that means that the average family will now have to fork out over £100 to fill up their car. £100. These prices will also be the latest hit to our already struggling haulage industry, as bosses are forced to spend 20 grand extra per lorry just to keep it fueled up all year round. Well, look, we're delighted now to be joined by Howard Cox, founder and CEO of the Fair Fuel UK campaign group, friend of the channel as well, I think it's fair to say. He fights against high prices and taxes for motorists. Howard, thank you very much. Always a pleasure, my good man. 100 quid to fill up your car. It's almost, not quite, almost enough to make me want to learn how to ride a bike.
Careful, Patrick, careful. It's very crippling, these prices. It's, as you quite rightly said, it's impacting on the economy and the haulage industry, and everything is in your studio at home was delivered on a truck. And we've got to realise that this is a catastrophe. We're talking about climate catastrophes. This is a public transport catastrophe. What really is important to understand is the government can do something about it, and they can do something about it now.
Well, what can they do?
Well, there's three asks we've got, Patrick, and the first one is to actually cut fuel duty by at least 20 pence. That will bring us in line with the average in Europe, for example, in terms of, because we're still one of the highest taxed motorists in the world. As you know, the 5p cut that we got in the spring statement in March didn't even touch the sides. And bear in mind, they are wallowing, the Treasury is wallowing in a shed load of VAT, billions. And with the windfall tax, the combination of the two is generating something like £8 to £9 billion for the Exchequer, which is equivalent to about a 20p cut in fuel duty if they passed it back to drivers. The second thing is the opportunistic profiteering that's been going on for decades further up the fuel supply chain. And I want to make it quite clear, the retailers aren't to blame, the forecourt managers, the forecourt owners. They are subject to tight contractual relationships with further up the fuel supply chain, and they are working on thin margins. What we need to do is have a body like Pump Watch, which I'm working with MPs, people like Craig McKinley and Robert Halfon, to convince the government. And I think Boris might be getting it because he came up 2 or 3 weeks ago in the headlines to say that he's angry with the fact that the fuel duty cut in March wasn't passed on. I think he's warming to the idea of a Pump Watch. And finally, the third ask is simply we need a Competitions and Market Authority investigation into actually how the price is arrived at the pumps. We're just not seeing any idea of how those calculations are put together because fundamentally someone's making a shed load of money further up, and unfortunately the impact, or should I say the people paying for that, are us drivers.
Should we be angrier? Because as you just said there, somewhere along the line, people who probably were already phenomenally wealthy are getting even richer, whilst frankly we're all being made miserable, OK? So everything's going up. The cost of living crisis is a massive thing. Should we be more outraged at the price of fuel?
Well, if you remember, I mean, you probably are too young to remember this, but the year 2000, we had the truck blockades of London. And I've always been anti these sort of actions because, like Extinction Rebellion and Insulate Britain, all that does is alienate the very people that you want to get on side. But I'm getting to the stage now with about 1,000 emails a week I'm getting for people calling for action and really do something more. Look at the train strike coming up. They're doing something to try and get something done. I don't condone that one bit, and I think that's disgusting what they're doing in the cost of living crisis. But unfortunately, the cost of fuel is impacting on every aspect of our lives, and the government, with a head in the sand, has now got to get it out of the sand and start doing something. Cut fuel duty and introduce Pump Watch. Would it reduce pump prices by something like 20 to 25 pence now? And the impact on inflation would be fantastic.
Yeah, look, absolutely. Howard, thank you very much. As always, Howard Coxev, founder and CEO of Fair Fuel UK, which is, of course, a campaign group. Let us know what you think, people. We're going to go to those views very, very shortly. GBViews at gbnews.uk. How is it affecting you? Have you cut down on the amount that you're driving? Have you had to cut your cloth elsewhere? Are you spending less on food and turning the lights off? Are you not having a shower? All these kind of things, right, that basically can help you save money. What's it like for you? But this is a story that I'm glad that we've actually managed to kind of finally come to, really, because there's a huge issue with this, OK? And I know a lot of you feel incredibly strongly about it. There's a film called The Lady of Heaven, right? So I've not seen it personally. It was released in UK cinemas this week, and it sparked huge outrage and protest in Bolton, Blackburn, Bradford, Sheffield and Birmingham. Yeah, absolutely. The film depicts the life of one of the daughters of the Prophet Muhammad and was announced as the first film ever made that would show the Prophet's face. Well, this has proven quite controversial, as depictions of the Prophet Muhammad, of course, are strictly prohibited in some Islamic sects. We all know that. Protesting Muslims say that the film is therefore blasphemous and intended to stoke up religious tensions. That's interesting, isn't it, really? Because the religious tensions that I can see there seem to be stoked by the chap standing outside of Cineworld waving banners that seem pretty hateful as far as I can see. But anyway, the film has already been banned in Iran, Pakistan and Egypt, with the UK cinema chain Cineworld also cancelling now all of these showings in Britain. Meanwhile, of course, pressure mounts on View cinemas to follow suit, with fresh protests erupting in London this morning. So, yes, indeed. I'm sure a lot of you will have seen the footage on Twitter, online and everywhere, really, of essentially, I suppose, how would you describe it, really? Loads of Muslim men, really, often in traditional garb and traditional Muslim dress, I suppose, outside with microphones and loudspeakers and this, that and the other, clearly very angry about this film. The Lady of Heaven's producer says that pulling out the film goes against British values. So is he right? Well, this is interesting. I want to know what your views are on this, ladies and gentlemen. Obviously, gbviews at gbnews.uk. Now, for me personally, OK, right, I'm not a Muslim, and therefore I presumably don't really necessarily understand how offensive it is to show a picture of the Prophet Muhammad. It's not something that's really on my radar. But what I am dead against is mob rule, OK? We cannot live in a society, in a country, where we have several different societies going on at the same time. And why is it that some people, can't just be offended and move on? Why can't people maybe get over that? Why does it have to be things like these massive, massive protests? And it's not just this, is it? It's that teacher from Batley Grammar School who, as I understand it anyway, as far as I'm aware, is still in police protection. Certainly his family are. He's not allowed to go back to the school or anything like that. That's mob rule, isn't it? There were death threats there, for goodness sake. We don't see it here, we see it abroad as well. There seems to be this huge vitriol, huge outrage whenever there's anything said against a particular sect of our community. And I'm not really sure that that's the right thing. That's not really our way of doing things, is it? But let us know what you think anyway. Keep these views coming in. There's a lot of you getting in touch on all of this as well. We'll go to those views very, very shortly. But, yes, we're going to move on now and just talk about some of the headlines that you might have missed to wrap this show up. So, yes, here we go. From porn in the House of Commons to porn in the force. That's right. A South Yorkshire police worker has been fired for watching pornography at work. So the worker, do we name him? It's a bit grim, this, isn't it? Stephen Connor has blamed his employer for not catching him sooner. That's the thing. It's an odd line of approach, but he's taken it. Connor was caught on the internal internet monitoring system after it was reported that someone was searching the words sexy and porn on almost a daily basis at work over a 2-year period. I'm going to hold my hands up here now for something rather funny that happened. Hear me out on this. On my laptop at work, on the office internet, and we had a guest on. She's got a lady called Brooklyn Blue, and she's great. And she comes on. She talks about things like OnlyFans and whether or not porn is demeaning to women. And she is an adult actress, shall we say? Anyway, so I usually will Google the names of my guests before they come on the show, right? And normally they're like, political commentators or a politician or something like this. And I was quite absent-minded when I did this, and I Googled the name Brooklyn Blue, and just a massive warning sign flashed up on my laptop. I was like, you are not allowed to access this kind of material on a work laptop. So there we go. Anyway, that's my excuse, and I'm sticking to it. Exam chiefs missed out 4 pages of questions from an A-level paper on Shakespeare plays, leaving pupils and teachers devastated that they'd been taught the wrong text. So the A-level pupils were expecting tests on things like Othello, The Tempest and Much Ado About Nothing after revising William Shakespeare for 2 years. But students opened the papers for English A-level language and literature exam to find that the questions were missing. So the mistake was made by Welsh Joint Education Committee, who promised the students would not be disadvantaged. At my old school, they had a teacher who taught the entire wrong syllabus. And so then he got sacked, actually, which I think is fair enough, only on balance. But, yeah, so you had an entire classroom of people who were taught the wrong syllabus. It just made me wonder, how on earth does that kind of thing actually happen, really? Because, you would have thought that at some point they'd have some kind of conversation in the staff common room about the syllabus, and they realise they're teaching the wrong one, but there we go. Royal Mail is releasing a brand new set of stamps showcasing some of the UK's most popular cat breeds. You love to see it. There are a total of 8 stamps. Oh, my gosh, if you're listening on radio, it's a second-class stamp for a first-class cat. There we go, he said it. There are a total of 8 stamps showing the animals playing, grooming, stalking, sleeping, stretching and staring. There we are, so cats on stamps, ladies and gentlemen. Fantastic. We are a nation of animal lovers, aren't we? We're an absolute nation of animal lovers. So I would love to see that, frankly. I did have a cat once. And I think I might have said this earlier, but I basically got absolutely had over by this cat sanctuary. So went with my now ex-partner, and there was like 6 cats, right? 5 of them were completely normal and just fine, just normal cats. And there was one at the end called Norma, and Norma was like this scratty little thing that was just like cowering away. And they were like, look, why don't you just... We know you won't want Norma. We can't rehome her, bless her. The implication there being if you don't give her a home, we're going to put her down, right? So you've got to just go and have a look at Norma and just see. Anyway, so then I walk into this cage, basically, and this cat comes out, and it's looking a bit scratty, bit of hissing goes on, and then the woman in the background goes, oh, she's chosen you. And then you've got to have this cat. I had this cat for 6 months. I never saw it. It was in the closet the whole time. There's a joking note somewhere, but I won't make it. The range of available Siamese cats, apparently, on these stamps. Tabbies, Gingers, British short-haired, Maine Coon, black and white, Bengal and Tabby. I don't know these types of cats, I think. Anyway, these are the cats on the stamp. So surely these will become a stamp collector's dreams in years to come. The bald cats freak me out a bit. Are they Siamese, I think? I don't know. Anyway, whatever they are. But what would you do, moving on now, if you woke up from a coma to find out that your fiancé has ghosted you and moved on with someone else? Well, that's exactly what happened, unfortunately, to Brie Duval, who also woke up to a text message from the alleged woman who'd moved on with her fiancé of 4 years. I mean, that's grim, isn't it? So Brie suffered from a horrific fall from a car park. She obviously then slipped into a coma, unfortunately, bless her, for 4 weeks, and this was last August. So clearly, I mean, by definition, almost about as unwell as you can possibly get. So she's gone viral on TikTok now under the username Hot Coma Girl, Hot Coma Girl, that'd be the one. Hot Coma Girl 1 with her story. But thankfully she's recovering. So health-wise, Brie's OK. But yeah, she woke up from a coma to a text message from her fiancé of 4 years, his now new partner, to say that he'd moved on. And I think that's a bit terrible, really, isn't it, really, frankly? But finally, right, OK, we've got police who have asked people to submit photos of selfish parking to add to thousands of drivers being fined. West Midlands Police's Operation Park Safe was launched in 2018 and resulted in thousands of fixed penalty notices. Don't tell me about it. Yeah, I've been there. Anyway, this has resulted in hundreds of dangerously parked vehicles being removed, some of which turned out to be stolen. So there's nothing like reckless parking to keep the community spirit going, is there? I don't know about you, but yeah, I can't stop really getting parking tickets, really. I've had a couple of absolute shockers because, again, I don't know about you, let me know about this, GBViews at gbnews.uk, but I'm always absolutely convinced that I'm in the right, OK? No one can ever tell me that I've parked illegally. I am adamant, and I'm on the phone to the council, or a robot who works for the council anyway, for about 4 hours, getting increasingly more and more angry until eventually someone confronts me with a picture taken by a traffic warden of where I've parked, and it turns out that I was, in fact, parked illegally. In fact, once in Hampstead, I was parked in front of a giant luminous yellow sign that said no parking allowed here. And I actually got done for that, obviously, so there we go. But it didn't stop me trying. Anyway, we're going to finish off with a bit of you, GBViews at gbnews.uk. Of course, we are the People's Channel. It's all about you. Thank you very much for everyone who's been getting in touch. And loads of topics to get in touch about today. We kick-started, didn't we, with Rwanda. I was saying, look, I'm not sure this deal is going to work. Why? Well, because essentially the lefty lawyers have come out in force, classic, and they're trying to put the skids on it as well. Also, of course, lots of people getting in touch about their fuel prices and smoking, whether or not they're going to raise the age of smoking to 21. But by far and away the most commented thing in the inbox today has been what's been going on outside Cineworld. The Lady in Heaven film has sparked massive protests for depicting, essentially, the Prophet Muhammad and one of his daughters, places like Bolton, Blackburn, Bradford and I believe Sheffield as well. It's kicked off big time with protests out there, and a lot of you getting in touch to say that you are absolutely fizzing with it. Say, look, we're supposed to be an inclusive country. We have to be more tolerant, i.e. the people protesting have to be more tolerant. A lot of you, it's fair to say, are very, very angry about what's going on there, saying that people essentially are not, in their view, like, for example, the view of Malcolm in Carlisle, that he doesn't feel as though people are doing enough maybe to embrace British culture. But look, thank you very, very much, everybody. Great to have you on board. Thank you very much for joining me for the ride. Wednesday, by the way, every single Wednesday, as you well know right now, we hand over that show to you. It's your show. It's full of your ideas. It's what you want us to talk about. So tell us, gbviews at gbnews.uk. Let us know what topics you want to hear on the news. I think that's a really good way of doing things. We are, of course, the People's Channel. But, of course, right now, that's it from me. I think you've had more than enough. I will be back tomorrow again, 10 a.m. until midday. Friday night feast as well, 7 until 9 p.m. But that's it from me. Up next is Gloria De Piero with the briefing. Do yourselves a favour, watch it.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGibbon from the Met Office. Dry and bright in the east with some sunshine, cloudier further west with some rain. Not a huge amount of rain. The weather front that's moving into the west is a relatively weak feature, but it is attached to an area of low pressure which is relatively deep for the time of year. We don't often see lows like this in early June, and it will bring some windy weather later Thursday and through the next couple of days. But for the time being, light winds, sunny spells in the east of England. Central and eastern Scotland also largely dry and bright. Just a few showers for Aberdeenshire, Caithness and Sutherland. Cloudier skies for western England, Wales and the far west of Scotland, with some outbreaks of rain, mostly on the light side, clearing from Northern Ireland, warming up here, and warm in the east, 21 to 23 Celsius. But where we've got the cloud and rain, more like mid to high teens. The rain moves east and then generally just peters out overnight, although there could still be a few drizzly showers affecting the south and southeast of England, 1 or 2 showers further west and northwest as well. But with a increased breeze, well, temperatures will stay up. Teens for many, and a mild night to come with the cloud and the breeze towards the southeast, 16 Celsius as we begin things on Friday. Friday starts off bright enough, with still 1 or 2 showers for the far southeast, but increasingly the showers become focused across Scotland and Northern Ireland. Some heavy downpours here and an increased wind. A very windy day for the Western Isles with the risk of coastal gales. Breezy for all, but actually relatively warm towards the south, 21 to 24 Celsius possible, whilst we'll see high teens for Scotland and Northern Ireland at best. The showers in Scotland and Northern Ireland push into the far north of England, North Wales, to Friday evening. And then Saturday sees a similar kind of day with showers for the northwest, drier and brighter elsewhere, but still very breezy.
I'm Darren McCaffrey, and join me on The Briefing Monday to Thursday at 3 p.m. You'll get your afternoon fix of all the latest political stories, debate and analysis, as well as interviews with some of the biggest names in UK politics.
It's a problem that affects the whole world, Darren.
From Westminster to Cardiff, Edinburgh and Belfast, if it's happening in UK politics, we've got it covered. That's The Briefing with me, Darren McCaffrey, Monday to Thursday, 3 p.m. on GB News.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's 2 questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.